Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of an experiment because when I published my novel Glory with Invisible, there was this period afterwards where women would read it and then they'd come up to me afterwards and say, mastitis, really emphatically. And that was kind of a joy because I'd never read anything in Canadian literature or any other literature for that matter about mastitis. And I wrote about that in Glory. So my great hope with this book was that people would come running up to me and say, masturbation! And it hasn't happened once. So I'm doing this reading as an experiment to see if after this, someone happens to come up and shout a thing at me. Pleasantly, I hope. Okay, I lost my spot already. I haven't even started. Okay, here we go. So this is from the first story, which is called Love Ramona. And this is where it's all gone wrong for Ramona. So she has left the bar. She's out on the beach by herself. She sat on the grass and held her hot head, sick and furious. She was stuck. She couldn't go back to the bar because of pride, but she couldn't find her hut either, and the thought of searching further in the dark made tears come to her eyes. She got to her hands and knees and crawled toward the sound of the water. At least she was still moving. If Ramona was writing the book of her life, which she never would, she wasn't a writer. So if she was writing a letter to someone, but not Louis, say her mother or her hypothetical children, she'd write about how much the sand hurt her knees and how grateful she was for the cool night wind. She'd write how once she left the dry sand and hit the wet, she stopped, turning to lay on one side facing the water, how she listened to the waves and wondered what sea animals would crawl into her hair if she kept still long enough. Normally that thought would have her up and brushing herself off, but she was so tired. She watched the waves swallow the stars and spit them out. She watched the clouds appear and disappear. She realized her eyes had adjusted and she could see. The nausea receded a bit and she thought about sitting up. Maybe Louis would leave the table to come to find her. Charlie wouldn't. He'd be having too good a time regaling Jessica with stories about himself. Louis would leave the table, saying he had to take a piss. He'd leave the bar and somehow be able to see better than she could. He'd see a body on the beach and his heart would lurch in his chest. He'd run flat out to make sure it wasn't Ramona, but it was her. He'd gather her up, say her name. He'd brush her sweaty hair off her forehead, make sure she was breathing. He'd kiss her gently. He'd slide the strap off her collarbone and kiss her there. He'd kiss the divot at the base of her neck. He'd set her head gently on the sand and start unbuttoning her shirt. She could feel his fingertips fumbling with the cotton and the bone buttons. She could feel his weight on the sand beside her. She felt his hands slide her bikini top off her breasts and cup them, and then she felt his mouth on her left nipple, then her right. The scent of Louis's hair was hot skin and ozone, disorienting Ramona, who associated the smell with snow. He came back up and kissed her mouth and licked her neck and moved her face this way and that. He undid the buttons of her shorts and slid them off her. There was a second Ramona might have stopped him so she wouldn't cheat on Charlie, and then she observed herself not stopping, not worrying, just feeling. It wasn't like her, but she didn't dwell on him. She focused on Louis's hands, his mouth. Her nipples hardened in the wind and the hair on her neck stood up as he skimmed his hand. ... I'm not going to read this part aloud. Okay, he moved his both hands. There are her thighs. Pulled her closer to him. She brought her hands to his hair, feeling the heat of his scalp, the damp of his sweat at his temples. They didn't speak at all until he said to her, "Here? Come with me." She shook her head. Her skin was sore from the sand. He pulled her to standing. They were naked and ... He gathered their clothes. He took her by the hand and led her into the bushes away from the beach. She followed him, the wind brushing all parts of her body. Small cascades of sand tumbled down her skin like pixie dust, grazing the backs of her knees. Stop it. Stop. Okay. Sorry. Come on. That is rude. Don't do that right now. Okay? He took her by the hand and led her into the bushes away from the beach. She followed him, the wind brushing all parts of her body. Small cascades of sand tumbled down her skin like pixie dust, grazing the backs of her knees, trickling down her legs as it came free. He led her to the concrete shower house and the lawn behind it. They were blocked from the beach by the bushes and shielded from the resort by the shower house. He sat her down and kissed her again. He pushed her on her shoulder so she lay down. He hovered above her. She reached for him. It was darker off the beach. He was a dark shadow against the dark sky, but the sensation of him was vivid. She tried to stop thinking so she could just feel, but fragments crept in. The flying fish, the heat where she'd leaned against Charlie's body on the boat and his dryer sheet smell, the moonlight beaming through the translucent crabs on the beach, the waves, Jessica standing on the dock, waving at them. Stop, seriously. There were memories, too, of Louis in France, his calloused fingertips brushing the tips of her nipples, the time he almost knocked her out with his elbow in the tent trying to roll them both over to get on top of her. Ramona, I think I'll just dot this bit because it's a little bit graphic. But there's an orgasm. That bit's really good. And then it's done and eyes glued shut, gasping. She dropped her chin to her chest, her bare back bowed, her sweat cooling. She imagined him bringing his hands up to stroke her sides, her cheek. Okay, he'd ask. She could barely make him out on the grass beneath her. She breathed hard, coming back to herself. There was nothing on the grass underneath her but her crumpled clothes, her own wet hands. She got up on her knees. She groped her way to the outdoor shower. She startled when the light flicked on, but the outside bulb was so weak she didn't feel she was visible. She turned the water on warm and soaped herself up. She used the yellow bar left on the shelf, lathering until a thick juice of suds streamed from her hands. She rubbed herself all over, her face slack with mindless action. She'd have to leave the resort in the morning. That was clear. She closed her eyes and let the water drum down on her hair. She was already gone in her mind. The boat, the taxi, the airplane, and home.